Welcome to Color Through the Ages, a chromatic journey through time. We will begin this lecture by discussing prehistoric man and their place in color history. We will start our journey at the caves of Chauvet and Lascaux. Chauvet Cave is one of the oldest examples of prehistoric artwork known to man. Discovered December 18th, 1994, by 3 speleologists, Chauvet Caves contains the oldest known examples of prehistoric cave art. The art carbon dates to 31,000 years old and contains examples of animals like lion, mammoths, horse, rhinoceri, bears, deer, hyenas, and panthers. The entrance to the cave, discovered high on the cliffside, had been concealed for millennia by a landslide and rock debris. Although the caves contain examples of some of the world's oldest art, their relatively recent discovery allowed them to be recognized almost immediately for what they were. While the caves are not open to the public, you can view a recreation of the caves that recreates all of the art and many of the formations in exquisite detail. Cave art had been discovered before Chauvet. One of our other examples of Paleolithic art comes from Lascaux caves. Lascaux caves are also located in France, but their discovery predates the discovery of the caves at Chauvet. As we discussed in an earlier lecture, the caves at Lascaux were found by a group of young boys during World War II. Although the boys immediately reported their findings, they were not believed, and it wasn't until after the war that visitors first started coming to Lascaux to see the prehistoric artwork. Another example of prehistoric cave art comes from Altamira, Spain. Altamira Caves marks the earliest discovery of cave art in Europe. One day in 1879, a landowner named Don Marcelino Sanz de Saltula went to the cave with his daughter, Maria. He was an amateur archaeologist and wanted to study some Stone Age tools that were on the ground. While he was researching, his daughter, who happened to be playing on the floor, looked up and said, "Daddy, look, bowls." Some of the most interesting paintings in the cave are of bulls in buffalo. Often painted in red ochre, we can see the link from even Paleolithic times to the cultural significance of bulls in the area. Other examples of animals in the cave include lions. Here in this image, we see lions that have been layered over top of each other, and some have more attention to detail paid to them than others. This suggests a reworking of art, maybe people coming in and learning from the drawings that were already there, or someone's personal progression towards drawing this particular animal. Many of the animals in the cave are game animals that would have been hunted by Neolithic man. Consider this deer painted in red ochre. I like to think about how the painter was probably very intimately aware of all of the anatomy and physiology of the deer, as it was an animal that would have been hunted and then butchered, but if not by the painter, then by members of their family. Interspersed amongst the animals at Altamira are examples of handprints. These handprints were created by taking pigment and chewing it up with a binder or mixing it with a binder and inserting it into a hollow reed and then blowing the pigment around the hand. There are also examples of hands that seem to have been dipped in pigment and placed nearby. But this negative image of hands shows an interesting sophistication of art and might have functioned even as a signature of sorts. Here we see another image of a red bull, as well as images of two bulls facing one another. These are done in outlines of charcoal with red or white pigment. We also see prehistoric horses. In many rooms, depictions of animals are overlaid and circle around the tops of rooms, often taking advantage of bulges or distortions in the rock to exaggerate their form. We also see examples of animals that are no longer in the area today, such as the rhinoceros and the hyena. Yet when it comes to cave paintings, especially those at Altamira, it is the handprints that always get me thinking about the people who must have made these paintings. We're not completely sure of the scenario in which these paintings were created. We don't know if it was part of ritual, part of religion, a hobby or pastime, or a way to communicate information. What we do know is that these caves were visited over and over again by generations of humans looking to connect with and create art. For those paying close attention, some of the handprints also holds potential clues to the identity of the painters. Occasionally, small handprints will be up high on cave walls where it is unlikely a child could reach. In these scenarios, we imagine that an older adult was potentially lifting the child up and teaching them how to leave their mark behind. I like to imagine the idea of a small child coming to these caves along with an older relative and getting to put their handprint right next to handprints from previous generations of their family. But what significance could cave painting and cave painting discoveries hold to modern color theory? Cave paintings allow us to analyze ingredients, note limitations, and appreciate ingenuity. Some ingredients were soot or charcoal, red and yellow ochre made from earth pigments, as well as chalk are used throughout these paintings. Next, we will move on to Egypt and learn about one of the first examples we have of a man-made color being produced. Much of what we know about color use in Egypt comes from tomb paintings. These tomb paintings have the advantage of having been sheltered, often out of direct sunlight or weather or the elements for thousands of years, and this allows the color to be remarkably well preserved. As pigments, Egyptians used ochres coming from clay like substances as well as minerals to produce the rich variety of colors we see present in their paintings. But these naturally available minerals and ochres were not the only pigments being used. Much of Egyptian art through all the kingdoms and dynasties also features a color called Egyptian blue, which was a synthetically created or chemically created color made by mixing lime, silica, and copper and heating in a kiln. This would then be ground back up to make the pigment. Other minerals used were minerals like malachite, orpiment, as well as lapis lazuli. As opposed to the animal fat mixtures used by prehistoric man, Egyptians were creating true paint from a tempera base, which could be from glue, gum, gelatin, or egg. We also see examples of encaustic painting using beeswax. Although there are some slight variations, this palette of 6 colors featuring red, green, blue, yellow, black, and white make up most of the Egyptian color palette. As mentioned previously, Egyptian blue was a very important color to the art of Egypt and is used throughout the dynasties. It's the oldest synthetic color, and it is often adornment of eyeshadow or headdresses for pharaohs, and is often an indicator of spirituality as well as religion. In Egypt, blue is considered the color of the heavens and also the color that represents Egypt as a state. Blue is also seen as the color of the Nile and often is included in depictions of royalty and those of high religious regard. We often see gods depicted with blue skin or blue headdresses, the lion, the symbol of Egypt, painted in blue. Here we even see blue on the headdress of Queen Nefertiti. Next, we will cover the classical period of Greece and Rome, starting with Greece. When we think of Grecian buildings, we often think of white, pure columns and ornamentation, such as the Parthenon, for example. What we often fail to account for is the erosion of time and its effects on pigments that create color. In fact, the paintings and the buildings in Greece were probably covered by vast amounts of color. Here we can see some artists' renditions of what buildings like the Parthenon must have once been like, covered in resplendent colors like yellow, green, blue, red, black, and white. Color would have also been present on the interiors of buildings, on relief carvings, as well as decorative elements along ceilings and walls. The Greeks are continuing the trend of sourcing colors from minerals, including vermilion or cinnabar, as well as verdigris, which comes from aged copper. Now we'll move on to Roman colors and Roman art. In Rome, things were just as colorful as they were in Greek society, if not more. There were gorgeous frescoes painted on walls and often were commissioned by rich clientele. Frescoes often contain rich vermilion colors, black, white, blues, and greens. One of the most famous colors that comes out of the Roman Empire is Tyrian purple, which comes from just off the coast of the city of Tyre and this specific mollusk that is found there. The city from which the color derives its name, Tyre, is located on the western coast of modern-day Lebanon. The secret to Tyrian purple, however, has almost been lost. There are a few people that are seeking to rediscover how to create the vibrant pigment today. The pigment comes from a small gland in these snails, and that gland has to be extracted and then very labor intensively processed in order to create just a little bit of dye. In the next video, we will see one man's journey to rediscovering how to create the pigment that goes into Tyrian purple. The European Middle Ages, sometimes referred to as the Dark Ages, represent a shift in our approach to and relationship with color in the Western world. As the Christian empire comes to a rise and we begin to see the building of these large Gothic cathedrals, we can see the relationship to color in the Middle Ages. While these buildings might look old and soot covered today, when they were being built, they were being constructed of fine white marble and other white stones. The only color largely seen in these buildings is found in the stained glass windows, which becomes a marvel of the Middle Ages. These stained glass windows are often extremely colorful and were made by craftsmen of the time. The illuminated manuscript is also a popular form of art during the Middle Ages. Illuminated manuscripts were handwritten books painted with decoration that generally included precious metals such as gold or silver. Pages were made from vellum or animal skin, commonly calf, sheep, or goat. About 1100 to 1600 illuminated manuscripts were produced in monasteries during this time. The production was largely done by priests and monks that were specifically trained for this task. Often the manuscripts had a religious component, although sometimes they were books of songs or folk tales, such as the Arthurian legends. Another example of color in medieval art comes from the colors used in the Bayeux tapestry. The Bayeux Tapestry depicts the story of the conquest of England in 1066, told in wool embroidery on linen cloth. While not technically a tapestry, the large embroidery project is one of the greatest examples of medieval art in color that we have remaining today. It tells the epic story of the Battle of Hastings, whereupon William, Duke of Normandy, who was French, also known as William the Conqueror, invaded England in 1066 and went on to become King of England. Considered a masterpiece of the medieval era, the tapestry consists of colored wool on linen and depicts 70 scenes from the Norman invasion of 1066. It is 230 feet long and contains 5 main colors: a grayed blue-green, a terracotta, a brownish yellow, a deep blue tinged with green, as well as an olive green. This period that we will cover is the Renaissance, which is largely considered from 1400 to 1600. During the Renaissance, we see an explosion in the types of pigments being used and color in general. We also see the discovery of oil paint. The types of oil used in this paint could vary from linseed, amber, fish oil, and castor oil, as well as drier oils like walnut oil, safflower oil, and poppy seed oil. In the Renaissance, we see Western artists begin to play with shape and form, as well as color and light. John van Eyck employed the use of verdaccio, which is a greenish-brown underpainting used to set the tone of all of the other colors in his work. In Leonardo's Da Vinci work, we also see chiaroscuro, which is the first type of value study. There is no color, just the use of light and dark to model forms. So here we see probably charcoal and chalk being used on a toned paper to create all the variation that Leonardo da Vinci was seeking to express the human form. We also see the advent of sfumato, which is a soft blending of colors done with oil paint that is pretty iconic of Renaissance work. We see it in examples like the Mona Lisa, where these tonal values create this very soft shift to have these soft, rounded forms in the face and body. Next, we will cover the Baroque period, which starts in the 1600s and goes until about 1750. Baroque period experimentation with color and light continues. Here we'll see Jan Vermeer using tones of green and red judiciously in his paintings, as well as very nice examples of using light to describe forms and to set the scene. We also see increasing use of bright colors like yellow and red, as well as a very beautiful blue that is iconic of this period. Going to move on to the 19th century for our next major advances in color. We get the first synthetic dye in 1856. Previous to this, we'd been using mostly plant as well as insect or mineral-based dyes such as Tyrian purple. Tyrian purple, here we see examples of Cleopatra's use of Tyrian purple on sails, as well as lining her palace with a purple stone. We see the Emperor Constantine, the first Christian ruler of the Roman Empire, also depicted in purple in this mosaic, and purple continues to be the color most associated with the empire to today and our modern depictions. Other colors used include indigo, which is extracted from the indigo plant, very common in Asiatic cultures like the Japanese and China. We also see other plants and insects, such as the cochineal scale bug, used to create this red. There's a short video here about the harvesting of cochineal. We also see woad that's predominantly used as a blue in Europe, such as in the Bayeux Tapestry, along with weld that creates this vivid yellow, and yarrow, which creates a yellowish green. We also have madder, which is a root extract that creates red, as well as Brazil wood, which creates a beautiful reddish purple. However, our first synthetic dye in 1865 changed the landscape of color. In 1856, a young chemistry student named William Henry Perkin discovered in his makeshift laboratory that he had at home the color mauveine, or aniline purple. He had set out to create quinine, but accidentally produced this aniline purple, which he later marketed as his own color, mauveine. Mauveine quickly became popular and was used to dye many, many things. Here we have an example of this brilliant purple on some silk cloth, as well as some example drawings of gowns that were created, dyed using this color, and an English fashion plate from 1864 showing the popularity of this color and its use. We also see the color green start to come in, and this green was made using arsenic. Here we see the green, the purple, and the orange all together. These new synthetic colors became quickly popular and exploded on the market. If we go back to this image, we can see that people were not shying away from color. In fact, they were embracing it. Colors to this point had been very what's called fugitive, as they wouldn't stay around for very long once dyed. And we can see the difference between early and Victorian colors as well as late Victorian colors. Victorians also used these colors extensively in their home decorating and were not afraid of making playful color combinations. We even see the celebration of William Henry Perkins's birthday, and the 19th century also brought us synthetic paint. By cerulean blue, zinc white, and alizarin crimson. For a quick timeline of colors, we see cobalt blue in 1775, cobalt green in 1780, cadmium yellow in 1819, followed by. Historically, we also see strange examples of color, such as the story of Mummy Brown. Mummy Brown comes from ground up and processed mummies, predominantly from Egypt and the Middle East. These mummies were procured by grave robbers and brought back to Europe and England in order to be ground into paint, as well as medical supplements, and were even used at things like unwrapping parties, where wealthy Victorians would pay for a mummy and then have it unwrapped at a party as a form of entertainment. Brings us to the end of our lecture on pigments and colors throughout history. I hope you had a great time and are able to look at all of the videos that were also featured in the in-class version of this presentation. Those are located in a separate playlist under the lecture title's name in our YouTube space.